Hello, hello. We're just doing a little Q&A sesh. If anyone wants to drop their thoughts, questions, comments in the chat. Can you guys hear me okay? Let's see if a few more people join. Yeah, I don't really have plans for this stream. Just opening up to anyone who has questions. And if anyone does, just drop those in the chat. I was hoping I could just check in with y'all and have a little conversation. It's been a minute. Hello, hello. For anyone who's in the chat, just doing a little Q&A session or whatever you guys want this to be. Figured I'd just check in. Finally have a moment. If you have any questions, yeah, just drop those in the chat. And hopefully I can answer them. Don't have any plans for this live stream. Just wanted to check in with some of y'all because you've been asking where I've been at. This is your chance to ask anything that's on your mind, anything related to design or anything, really. What up, what up? For anyone who just joined, just trying to do a little Q&A, but no one's asked a question yet. So don't know how long I'm gonna go here, but yeah, I was hoping, oh, there we go. From Ivan Sierra, I would like to know what is the first step to create a design system? Well, I think that's a interesting question. I think it kind of depends on what stage of the design process you're in. So maybe if you could specify, right? Because not every project is going to require a design system. Also, not every client or project is going to need a design system. So the beginning. So to be honest, okay. So from scratch. So I'm assuming like once you've already done your design, right, and then you want to like systematize stuff. Is that what you're asking? Because normally I'm not like if I have a design task ahead of me, or if I'm trying to solve a problem, I'm not going right to a design system, right? So yeah, okay. So that's what you were thinking. Yeah. So typically, actually, me personally, just because I design in Figma, and Figma has made it so easy these days to like use components and auto layout and all this stuff. I actually tend to componentize things as I go, and I'm already starting to think about like systems how things will kind of scale across the whole UI. It also helps if we've already done some sort of like art direction phase, or if we have a visual language that we're kind of adhering to. But if we're going completely from scratch, yeah, I'm not really worrying about the systematization, if that's a word, of my designs until everything's kind of locked down, until I've solved the problem that I want to solve. Then I'll usually go in and start cleaning things up. But a lot of this, I would say it's like kind of easy to do as you go now. Like if I'm using a card component, for example, or if I'm using, buttons, and I know I'm going to have a few button states, I'll kind of, as I'm going, I'll quickly like, organize my file a bit. I'll create a few button styles. I'll create a few card styles. If those are grouped in different layouts, I'll, componentize those. I usually start with my smallest elements. If I'm pulling from an icon library already, that's great. But if I'm creating all custom icons, maybe I'm like starting to componentize some icons that I know I'm going to be reusing, like some of the navigational icons, for example, like a back arrow, for example, or a plus icon or a search icon. Like these are icons that, regardless of whatever you're designing, they're probably going to have some form of these. So the short answer is I'm kind of doing a little as I go. But at the very end, once the task is complete, I work in client-facing roles all the time. So if I've expressed my designs to a client already and they give me the green light, this is good to go, then I'll kind of go in and do some cleanup, add to whatever system I'm working in. This is if I'm doing everything from scratch. Oftentimes, we already have an established design system that we're just pulling from. But if you're doing things from scratch, that's usually the way I like to go. Just because if you're worrying about systematizing things right from the get-go, I think that limits your creativity a bit. Although it's kind of a balance, right? Because sometimes creating components, starting to systematize things, I actually work faster doing that just because I've gotten the habit of, learning what works for me. But I know some people, they don't like to do any components. They like to keep things super loose so they can move things around really easily, not worrying about auto layout and detaching components. So they usually wait till the end. I think you kind of just have to find what works for you and, go from there. Hopefully that kind of answered what you were thinking, Ivan or Yvonne. For you, best tips to get a good portfolio to apply. So I'm assuming this is like if you haven't had any commercial experience yet, like maybe you're looking for that first job. I mean, it's really just about creating, I would say 3 to 4, maybe even like 2 to 3 personal projects. So I've said this before, but just like thinking about, problems that you're facing and, following a UX process to create some sort of portfolio piece, some sort of design output that you'd be able to, tell a story around in an interview. I'm assuming you mean, going for like but I want to go up, get a better role. Yeah, I mean, as long as, it depends on the role you're applying to, right? Like, is it a visual design role? Is it more like a hybrid product design role? Is it a service design role? I would need a little more specifics around that. But as long as you're able to demonstrate some bit of design craft, as well as your ability to solve some sort of problem and follow some sort of user-centered approach to get there, that's what companies are looking for. I will say, people tend to overlook the craft sometimes, but most people who are, looking at portfolios are looking at, 50 to 100 per day. So the visual design has to be on point. That's something you need to just hone your skills in. That's not something you really need a great job to learn. There's so many tutorials out there. A lot of it's just like exploring on your own, learning a bit about, design fundamentals, because you really need to make a good first impression. That gets recruiters in the door, makes them want to read more, makes them want to contact you, interview you. Your portfolio should really just be the doorway into an interview. You don't have to show everything in your portfolio. It should be just enough to get them interested. Then you can go a little deeper in that interview stage. But yeah, that's how I'd approach it. If you already have a job already in the field, you probably have, some projects that you could show. If they're NDA protected, there are ways around it. I usually just don't tell anyone. I usually just don't password protect, and I'll just show it anyway, and then I'll just take it down when I get the job, if I get the job. So but yeah, even if your stuff's confidential, there's ways around it. You can blur out logos, stuff like that. I'm trying to switch into a designer role through my current company. Can you talk a bit about your own experience switching to design within your company when you first got started? Yeah. So I think I've said this in some of my videos. Right out of school, I actually was a management consultant. I worked for a really massive company called Accenture. You might have heard of it. We've got something like 300,000 employees. I did management consulting for 2.5 years. And to be honest, I had no idea what I was doing. I was not interested in consulting at all. I just kind of thought it was the obvious path. You graduate school, you study business, you go into finance or consulting. But I learned very quickly that consulting wasn't for me. Wanted to do something a little more creative. I've always been a very creative person. And even before that started, when I was still an undergrad, I got some internship experience working under a product designer. So I kind of learned what that role even was. At that time, they probably called it more of a UX designer. That role has kind of shifted a little. But yeah, from that internship experience, I actually learned what that role was a possibility. So during my consulting time, kind of on the side, I was just teaching myself, design. I took a boot camp. I was just like learning about the field. I was honing my craft a bit. And because I worked at Accenture, which is such a massive place, I didn't even have to look outside of the company. Accenture is actually home to Accenture Interactive, which is like a really massive digital agency. They house companies called Fjord and Drogified and Wirestone and basically a lot of subsidiary agencies. So there were a lot of actual opportunities within Accenture that I could pursue once I felt good enough. Once I felt like my skills were, in a place where I felt comfortable applying. So that's kind of how I got into the field. I interviewed at a few of these subsidiary agencies and ultimately landed a role. And from there, it was like off to the races. It's actually, I don't know, I think I got a little lucky too, because one of the managers just kind of took a chance on me. I guess he just saw like, I had a good work ethic. My work was like good enough, but kind of just threw me into the fire on one of these first roles. And that's how I did it. And I was lucky because Accenture works with all the Fortune 500. So I got some pretty big client names on my portfolio, just, as a result of working for Accenture, which that's why, like, I don't think it's a bad idea to work for an agency, because you can rack up some big names and big projects. And a lot of them are like, really heavy UX focused, especially if you're working as a UX designer in a consulting company. A lot of them are like B2B applications. And those are the ones that really, really test your UX skills, I'd say, more so than, visual design, graphic design. And they kind of just get you thinking like a designer. And then once you kind of hone those skills, I think the world is kind of your oyster, especially if you have a few big names. So yeah, that was my path, but yeah, I can't say that path is applicable to everyone. So sorry if that wasn't too helpful, Jun Zuferi. But yeah, thanks for the question. Can you bring videos on advanced UX concepts and topics? Yes. Although, I don't know, when you say advanced UX concepts and topics, I think UX is as hard as we make it. That's my personal preference, but I think what you're kind of getting at is like, could I show more like case work? And I definitely plan on it. The reason I've actually been gone from YouTube for a while is because recently got promoted to lead, and I've been leading a few pretty big projects, and there hasn't really been much time, to be completely honest, along with everything else in my personal life. But these projects, at least 2 of them, are going live very soon, which means I can actually share with you all like what my process was, and I can take you under the hood of my, design files and just, show my research process. And I think those are the types of videos that I really want to make more of, just because, it's easy to, teach the theoretical side of UX, but until you actually see the application and the practical side, it doesn't really land as well. So I'm really looking forward to just showing you some more casework. But yes, short answer, yes, I will bring back some more UX topics and concepts. What do you think the difference is between working on enterprise versus consumer, if you have experience in both? Yeah, it's a very relevant question. I was just talking about this today with someone. So when I was at Accenture, a lot of my clients were like enterprise. I was doing a lot of like B2B apps, sales tools, again, like very like enterprisey, I would say, versus the consumer side, which is mostly like what I'm doing now at my new agency called YML. It's part of the reason I actually left. I wanted to work on stuff that like I would actually use on my phone. That's the stuff I really love creating. It's just a little more exciting to me. Not to say that the work I did at Accenture wasn't valuable. It was just very, like I would never use these tools day to day. So it was I don't know, it just like wasn't as exciting and wasn't as creative, I would say. But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the main difference that I found. I feel like I'm just like a lot more creative working on these like consumer applications. Also, the ones I've worked on, they're a lot smaller companies than the ones I was working on at Accenture, which means they're a lot more flexible and they're less rigid, which means that like there was more creative freedom. I felt like on my end. Whereas if you ever wanted to like move the needle at all at one of these big companies, like you had to go through so much red tape. So yeah. I mean, getting more realistic and deep things to learn in UX that are rare to find. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like my process isn't too complicated, I would say. It's more or less like sticking to, a standard UX process where it's kind of like a divergent, convergent process. I tend to try to follow like some sort of double diamond process, although no two projects are the same. Sometimes you're starting way upstream. Sometimes you're just starting right in dev handoff. Like it just depends at what phase of the project you join. Yeah, I know, Rocket. It's been a minute. And I apologize. I've just, like I said, it's been a pretty crazy year. A lot more responsibilities this year, I would say. So I've had to kind of prioritize those. But like I said, as soon as these projects go live, I definitely want to like do a little mini series, just like showing you my full process and like everything that goes into, launching what I would call a world-class product. That's not tooting my own horn. That's honestly tooting the horn of my team that was involved. There was like a ton of different stakeholders and moving parts, and show you the interlink maybe between the different functions, like the designers, the product people, the developers, client strategists. Basically show you like everything that goes into shipping a really great product. What is my LinkedIn? It's just my name. I'll put it in the chat. Feel free to connect. Are there any enterprise apps that are good examples of web UI? I mean, that's kind of subjective, right? But I mean, something I use every day, Notion, great. I think that's a great user experience. It's not like the most pretty thing in the world, but in terms of solving a problem, we kind of use Notion internally as like our company, like wiki in a sense. So like everything I would ever need to know about my company lives on Notion. So that's probably a good example. I mean, Slack, like a lot of the workplace tools there, I would say those are great. Slack has a web app as well. Actually, I don't know if they still do, but yeah, those are great. Any other questions? Maybe even sites you might look to for inspiration. Could you be a little more specific, like inspiration about what? Because like there are some sites that I think have really great visual design. Some things are more functional in nature. The web is a little tricky, to be honest, because I think like web designers and product designers kind of, they're just very different, in what they're actually trying to do. Like on the web generally, unless it's a web app, if we're talking like website, like a marketing website, the goal of those sites are generally communication and to help you like connect with a brand. So I would say like there's a lot more like creative liberties taken. Whereas when we're talking about product design, whether it's a web app or a native app, usually the goal is to solve a very specific problem and making it, as simple as possible for the user to solve that problem. So the goals of those are a little different. But yeah, I mean, there are tons of sites I stumble upon for just like cool websites. You can go on Awards or Dribble or like any of these sites, you'll find some great ones. To be honest, I don't really look at a lot for inspiration. Like it kind of just depends on what I'm working on, right? Like if I'm designing something that's in a certain visual language, I'll look at other sites in that visual language kind of for inspiration or similarities. I don't know if that really answered your question, but yeah, it all kind of depends on like what problem we're trying to solve. That's where I'll go for inspiration. I want a lot of videos regarding how you solve problems when designing products. Yeah, a lot more of that coming for sure. So just stay tuned. I wish I had more just like, personal work that I could share that isn't, protected under some sort of NDA that I could just show you every day. I just, to be honest, don't have a ton of time to like, build those out. Are you freelance in-house? So I'm actually neither. I work for an agency right now. So it's not quite in-house and it's not quite freelance. Basically, we help other companies solve their problems. So think of it like a consultancy, but a little more experience design focused. My current company, we're a product design and development shop. So our I would say value proposition is more like speed to market, a lot of experimentation. Of course, we do research, but we don't over-index on research to the point where we never ship anything. Like, we're first and foremost builders. Like, we're 60% engineers. So that's kind of our bread and butter. Like, that's kind of why we win work over like the Frogs and the IDEOs of the world, just because a chief digital officer will come to our company and say, like, I need to get this product to market yesterday, right? So speed is like the number one concern. And if they don't get it to market, they're going to lose in the market. So they just need people who can build fast, break stuff, experiment a lot, and test a lot, do a lot of testing. Yeah, I'm actually working on a new portfolio. I'm gonna take y'all through that as well once these case studies are live, because there's a lot of work that's gone into it. I'm working on a project for an enterprise web app and looking for ideas for a homepage, like a cloud storage homepage. Oh, well, cloud storage, I mean, there's tons of examples, right? Dropbox, Microsoft has Box, there's Google Drive. I think Apple, what's Apple's iCloud, which is terrible. So maybe don't look at that one. I think Dropbox is pretty solid. Do you have more experience designing the first version of features at, say, a startup, or more experience designing refined? So you're talking about, do I have more experience going like 0 to 1 or kind of improving an existing product? I would say, just due to the nature of the brands I work with, it's probably the latter. Although one thing at the agency level, which is super cool, is we're always pitching like either new products or new features or new ideas. So those are, I would say, those projects where we're not as bound to like product requirements, so to speak. We're actually like investigating the problem space. We're seeing, is there a need for something new? Is there a need for a new product or a new feature? Is there a new opportunity here? And then we're pitching it to the client either proactively or one thing at the agency level, something that happens all the time is companies will send out something called an RFP, which is a request for a proposal. So it's basically a competition to win the work, right? So like a bunch of different agencies will compete. They'll pitch the client their work, their ideas. And then if they win the work, then they, start going into definition. They'll actually define more of the scope of the work. But at that pitch phase, which is only usually like a week or two, you just like, show me what you can do in a week or two, give us your best shot with no product requirements. And that's honestly what I love most about working at an agency, because you don't really have any, like I said, hard product requirements to adhere to. You can get a little crazier. Doesn't have to make perfect sense, UX wise. It just has to get them inspired, show that we're thinking about we're thinking about the problem strategically. We're thinking about their users and their needs, and do something new and innovative that they wouldn't be able to do in-house. So I would say like that's where I probably get that more of that like 0 to 1 experience, so to speak. But yeah, just due to the nature of like the clients we work with, a lot of them are pretty established brands at this point. But yeah, like right now I'm working on a brand new product for pretty cool company as well. So it just depends. How do you manage your time when you're balancing full-time work as a consultant and doing UX on the side? Not really sure I understand that question. So right now I'm not really working full-time as a consultant. I'm working as a designer at an agency. And as far as doing UX on the side, not really sure what you mean by that. Like, are you talking about the YouTube stuff? As you can see, I haven't balanced it very well because I don't think I've put out a video all year. So, before, like when I was like transitioning into the UX field, Yeah, that was kind of a grind, to be honest. It was like I would leave work and then I would just work on my craft, or I'd learn about it, or I'd watch videos, or take a boot camp. Yeah, it was a lot, but it was something I really wanted to do. So yeah, I just had to put in the work. Why these big companies do bad design sometimes, like Apple, and their one design was lacking contrast text. How is this real? As they have great designers. Honestly, you'd be very surprised. Like a lot of these big companies, and I've worked with a decent amount of them. Like you expect them to be these big tech giants with like focus on design and development, but we actually get under the hood and it's a complete mess. Not to shit on Apple, but I've heard just it's not as glamorous as one would think. Apple in particular, I think a lot of their best designers probably work on their like design system, like the human interface guidelines, and probably work on the marketing websites and stuff, like the AirPods site, and like that's the real glamorous stuff. But if you look at like their actual suite of products, I don't know, we were like kind of joking about this in a work Slack group. Like they've probably shipped like just as many terrible products as great products when you think about it. Again, not to shit on Apple, they're just one example. Like all the big companies, they're not as glamorous as one would think. Um, Everyone needs help internally. Also, a lot of it is like just budget, right? Like they have a certain amount of budget that they get for certain projects. Some will get more attention than others. So those ones that don't get as much attention obviously are not going to be as executed properly. But yeah, good question. I was actually very surprised to learn that as well. Um, a lot of it is like I said before, like these massive companies, like there's so much red tape, so it's just very hard to like get things across the finish line and get things done. You have to go through so many different levels usually for approvals and stuff. So that could be why there's a lot of like legacy stuff that just like hasn't been brought to the forefront. CSS experience I should aim for as a product designer. I mean, none. I mean, like you should understand, I would say like from a system perspective, just like understand colors and like how they might scale across your UI. And I would say focus your efforts more on design systems than like pure writing CSS. That's probably a way better use of your time. I've written maybe like 2 lines of code in my entire career. I will say though, like learning Webflow is very helpful, at least like for conceptual understanding of CSS, HTML, like page structure, responsive design. Those are like good things to learn conceptually. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about writing code. A good test is like, can you build your own portfolio site in Webflow? If you could do that, it's going to be actually very beneficial for your design career. It really helped me a lot. Like understand grids and understand responsive design and how type scales across different breakpoints and those types of things. Any other questions? These are all really great. Where are you guys from / what are you doing career-wise? I hate UX research, but I have to make a case study in which it's a must, as you know what to do. Well, to be honest, like you shouldn't really ever be designing something unless there's a need for a product. And usually you determine that need by conducting some sort of research. So that would be, unless you're just trying to show off your visual design skills, which, to be honest, is becoming more and more commoditized these days. So I wouldn't frame it like that. It should be more like, what problem are we trying to solve? And then, so like, here's where we are, here's where we might be able to get, but what happens in between, right? That's kind of your job as a UX designer. It's like asking the right questions. It's gathering some insights. It's from those insights determining, okay, here's what our users want. Here's some features that we might be able to, build. And here's how we prioritize those features. And we start designing for those. So it's like, you need to follow some sort of process. Like how would you get from a problem to a solution without doing any sort of research, That's like the one thing when people send me portfolios to review, like if there's no clearly defined problem in the beginning and someone just jumps right into a solution space, it's like, you're not really doing UX, to be honest. Good question though. But I don't want to invest time in surveys and other stuff. I want another person to do it. Yeah, well, maybe you could do that, like recruit a person and just like work with them, right? Like at our company, we actually have like dedicated researchers. I'm pretty involved like end to end, and sometimes I'll do everything myself, but sometimes like I'll work pretty closely with a researcher, whether that researcher's on the agency side or the client side. And at the beginning of every project, we'll ask a client like, can you provide us with any research or strategy decks that you've used in the past? Because if the research already been done, it's like, okay, we're just taking those insights and maybe diving a little deeper, conducting our own as well. But there's also research that there's two main types of research, right? There's primary research and secondary research. Primary research being research that you conduct yourself. You go out into the field, you're talking to users, or the secondary research is what I just said. You're leveraging existing research already. So at the bare minimum, do some secondary research. Go on Reddit, go on forums, see what people are talking about with regards to this product. Go on the App Store, read the reviews. Like there's some stuff you can do to at least do a little bit. I know a lot of people only like designing, and that's cool. But if you want to be a UX designer, like you need to kind of understand a bit more, right? If you only like designing and you really just want to kind of brand yourself as a visual designer or a graphic designer or an art director, that's totally cool. Those roles exist, but it's just not UX if you only do, pixel, if you're only pixel pushing. What type of questions you love to answer on which you can talk for hours? I mean, these are all good questions. I mean, these are questions I was asking very early on in my career as well. I was very confused by like what a product designer or UX designer actually does. It's kind of ambiguous, still kind of is, to be honest. But yeah, I love answering all these questions. Just like any hurdles you guys might have. Sorry if you hear my dog drinking his water. Yeah, any problems you guys are having, or just like setbacks or questions, or these are all really great, I think. I'd also like to know, some of you guys have said like what type of videos you want me to make. Like I think more of that is always welcome here. Also got to learn how to like share my screen on this, because maybe I could do some portfolio reviews and live stuff like that, take you into my files. That'd be really cool. Just haven't looked into it yet. Anything else? I've seen on LinkedIn some controversy regarding not using basic tools. Can you be a little more specific? I'm not sure I follow. When you say basic tools, what are you referring to? Like design tools? And what's the controversy about that exactly? Where to find unique and new problem statements, as most of them are already solved in other case studies. Well, it's not so much the problem statement, right? It's the problems, right? So, I mean, there's always problems to solve, right? And the same problem can be solved different ways too. So I wouldn't use that as an excuse, right? Think about like all the design tests that candidates have to do. It's usually probably the same problem. They just want to see which candidate approaches that problem space the best and follows the best process and arrives at a solution that was well thought out. So, hey, Skeed Walker. Yeah, I know. Been a while. Sorry for the hiatus. But yeah, good to be back. Feels right to be here. So hopefully I'll do more of this. Paper pens going too far into design without purpose. Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, we see that all the time. It's so tempting to just start designing. And to be honest, there are some problems that can be solved by just experimenting a lot. Like I've definitely done that. Is it the best UX process, like by the book? No. Um, but I have produced work that has gotten results just by going right into design. I'll be the first to admit that. Um, but yeah, definitely, I mean, also again, depends on what stage of the process you start, but assuming you're starting like, with a fresh slate, companies having a problem, they approach you. How can I solve this problem? You want to follow some sort of, by the book process, if you will. It doesn't have to be completely, what you learn in those boot camps, but you basically want to go wide, go narrow, go wide, go narrow. That convergent, divergent process is very important. But yeah, definitely need to do some investigation in the problem space. You have to talk to users. That's like one thing that for some reason people still do not do all the time. Like they're trying to be user-centered designers and they don't talk to users, or at the very least they don't, investigate, what users are saying about the product or the space. So yeah, I never really understood that. Like how can you go into solutioning without even understanding the current experience and the pain points, right? It's like people still skip that step, which is like mind boggling. Like how can you make something better if you don't understand the current state, right? What have you been up to the past year? I've been up to a lot. I was just telling everyone in this chat, I've been just super busy. I've been managing a few projects, so have not had a ton of time to do YouTube, unfortunately, but yeah, I got promoted to lead this year, which has been a lot more responsibility than senior designer. So it's kind of why. Actually, like I'm just wrapping up a project now, which is why I have some time. The $1 million question: why WhatsApp says this message is deleted? The world hates it. To be honest, I'm not really a WhatsApp user just because I'm in the States and I don't really have anyone that I know internationally. So I don't really have a real reason to use WhatsApp. So I don't really know what that is referring to, if I'm being completely honest. I'm searching for my first product design role right now. It's so hard mentally with seeing layoffs and finding opportunities. Yeah, I feel you. It's a very crazy time right now, to be honest. I think this phase will pass. A lot of it's kind of just the macro environment, right? Like the economy is a little crazy right now. But that said, yeah, just keep at it. I would say just keep networking too. That's like a part that often gets overlooked. It's a lot of times it's just like finding someone who you can hit it off with, hopefully they'll give you a chance if they see something in you. A lot of times it extends beyond just the work itself. Like, are you a team player? Are you a good communicator? Are you someone they'd like to work with, right? Like these are often overlooked traits. So yeah, don't underestimate the value of just networking as well. How can you make lo-fi more visually appealing? I know you use comments. I know you have used comments, but people don't respond well to them. Well, I mean, the whole point of lo-fi is it's not supposed to be visually appealing. And to be honest, like I've fallen in the trap of like making my low fidelity stuff like look too good where it actually confuses the client. So like I've gotten the habit, if I am ever doing wireframes, which is not something like I do too often, to be honest, but if I am, like I intentionally make them look like really bad just so like the client's not interpreting them as, the final product. It's more of like a content map, if anything. So yeah, that would be my answer. Yeah, being a lead is rough, but it's also great. I think it's tough because I'm still very hands-on, like in the actual like craft myself, just because I like it and I want to be. But it's also on top of that, like it's managing other members, and you're kind of like the face of the design team now, at least on projects where you don't have like a creative director as well. So it's a lot more responsibility for sure, but it's very rewarding, I will say. And luckily I've gotten on some really fun projects. I tended to make a mid-fi to be more friendly. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it all depends on like the product you're working on, right? Like sometimes there's not even a need for wireframes, right? Personally, like I feel like the design tools today are so good that that step is often not really necessary. Like if I'm ever actually doing wireframes, I'm just using pen and paper. And then like once I kind of understand the direction and making sure I'm solving the right problem, I'll usually just dive right into high fidelity, especially if I have, a design system to work from already with like components that exist already. I guess it's a little different if you're doing it from scratch, but yeah, wireframes to me are a little outdated, to be honest, at least digital wireframes. Yep, going strong. Just landed 3-month contract at Zoom. That's awesome. I hate the Zoom UX, so please fix it. we always joke about how bad the Zoom UX is. That's amazing. Where are they based? Are they in? I think they're on the West Coast, right? San Francisco, maybe. That's awesome, though. Congratulations. 3-month contract. Yeah, I would just say like that's a great opportunity to just prove yourself, and hopefully they'll bring you on full time. That's amazing. Yeah, please, do your best to make it better. I have some. I don't know if you ever want to talk to someone, research the space a little bit. I use it every day. So, yeah, it's San Jose. That's great. Another $1 million question: why Snapchat doesn't have story number bars that can help show you how many number of stories a person has posted? I haven't used Snapchat in a minute, so I'm not totally sure what it looks like these days. But yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that I'm sure they have, they have a design team, and they probably have, hundreds of designers working on this stuff. So that would be a question more for them. Maybe they haven't considered it. Maybe you could put in a feature request and see what they say. We tend to forget, like, it's very easy to say, why didn't this tech company do it this way, right? But we tend to forget, like, they have, hundreds of designers that are testing this stuff every single day. And I'm sure they've considered a lot of this stuff. Maybe they haven't, but, and to my point about Zoom, like some of it's like, why haven't you fixed the chat yet? Like the chat is so bad. Any other questions, guys? How long have you been going? Almost an hour. Wow, that flew by. I'm curious, has content creation changed your life for the better? Actually, yeah, 100%. And I don't know if I've talked about this on this channel, but the whole reason I even started making YouTube content is because when I was trying to get into this field, I didn't really have any commercial experience. And I had like personal projects, but I was kind of using YouTube just as a supplement to my portfolio, just to show like I understand this stuff, to some extent, or at least I thought I did at the time. I understand some tooling. I can prototype something for you. So it was more just like to prove myself as like prove my technical skills. But then people started, really enjoying the content, or at least I get pretty good feedback on my videos and stuff. So I stuck with it for a little bit. I was a lot more regular, I would say, with YouTube when I had the time. But to the point where YouTube actually landed me a job at Frog, which is like a top design agency. I can talk about this now because the product's live, but it was actually pretty crazy. They were shipping HBO Max, right? The streaming service. And they had this big investor day where they're basically unveiling the product to the world, like for the first time. Think of it as like an Apple kind of keynote thing. But they hadn't built it yet. So they wanted to show all these investors, here's what this is going to be, but they needed a fully interactive prototype that looked and felt exactly like the real product. And I guess someone at Frog had seen a lot of my prototyping tools, and they were using a very specific tool. I think it was Principal, or that's what they wanted to use at the time. And I had some, Principal experience. And they actually DM'd me on Twitter, which was hilarious. They're like, hey, I work for a design agency called Frog. And I was like, of course I know Frog. Do you want to help? And of course I said yes, even though I wasn't technically legally allowed to do that because I was working at Accenture at the time. So I was basically working like 2 full-time jobs at once. I somehow made it work. And it was awesome. I got to work with their design team and some of their motion designers and their creative directors, and I'm still really close with a lot of them. And that was really all just because I put myself out there. So, any tips to some of you guys struggling to find jobs? You have to make recruiters come to you, not the other way around. Like, what are you going to do to funnel them your way rather than having to apply to a bunch of jobs, where their recruiters are seeing hundreds of applications, per day. Like, why don't you take a different approach and, be a little more proactive about it? I know it's easier said than done. And yeah, I probably got pretty lucky, but yeah, that was a pretty cool experience. I've always stayed away from working at agencies. What's your experience been like? Yeah, I was actually planning on making a separate video about like so far working at agencies. I think I've determined that I am an agency guy only because I get bored really quickly. Like if I'm working on something for more than, I would say 8 months maximum, like I need to try something new, because when you're staring at the same thing and solving the same problem or looking at the same problem over and over again for a very long time, it gets a little stale. I don't really care who you are. Plus agencies, like a lot of the reason that, these big companies come to agencies is they want, that premium look and feel too. That's one thing that often gets overlooked at like these big tech giants who have, either established systems or like they have all these rules and regulations. Like they want that infusion of creativity. And I find that working at agency, like there's always that variety in the types of work. You get to pitch all the time, which is great. That's like, designing with no guardrails at all. There's a lot of that. I get also working at agency, I would say a big benefit is the mentorship you get, because especially like just starting out, if you're like a junior or senior designer, you're going to be paired with people on a team that's like comprised of, well, it could be creative directors, it could be associate creative directors, it could be lead designers, but there's that kind of like hierarchy, I would say, where you always get to learn from people who have been doing this for a while, who have a large portfolio of big clients who they've worked with. And I feel like they just offer so many different experiences of value that you can kind of pick their brains on. But yeah, for me, it's more about the variety and just, working on some really awesome projects with some big name clients. It never really gets stale. It does get busy though. There are some downsides to the agency work, right? Because whenever you're in a service kind of role when another company hires your company, there's a lot of pressure, I would say. Because, the client's always right at the end of the day. Even if you are right and in your heart of hearts, you're right. The work is good when the client says it's good, right? Or when the client's happy. So, that can mean some long nights here and there, some weekends. I mean, it's the same everywhere, but I would say there's that like extra level of pressure to perform, I would say, at an agency, but that makes you stronger. So yeah, I've definitely thought about going in-house, and I've had, companies approach me about going in-house. It's just like, I need to know, like, am I going to get bored of this? Like I would have to be very passionate about not only the product, but the industry and the space that they're in, for me to like really stay motivated. That said, there are definitely pros of working in-house, because you get to see things, all the way through end to end. You get to iterate on it a few times, right? A lot of times at agencies, not all the time, but a lot of times you'll ship an MVP and then you'll kind of just like, pass it off to them, including the entire code base, right? So you never really get to see that next iteration. But if you're really embedded in-house somewhere, like you get to see, all the trials and tribulations of that product, right? Like imagine being at like Instagram or something, right? You get to see that full evolution of that product, and you have like massive data science teams behind you that you get to work with hand in hand. So like there's definitely pros and cons to both, but yeah, I just feel like that variety factor is what has kept me at an agency. And I also just love the people I work with too. So, do you still use Principle for animating and prototyping? To be honest, if I'm animating something, I'm pretty much doing everything exclusively in After Effects these days, just because, and I mean, obviously if it's a basic prototype, I'll just stay in Figma, but if it's something where that doesn't need to be interactive, I've just gotten the habit of doing everything in After Effects, just because I think the quality and the output and the control of everything is just so much better. Does it take longer? Yes, but I don't know. I've learned to love it. It's like a love-hate relationship. I don't really do a ton of like high fidelity interactive prototyping beyond Figma. Yeah, more After Effects stuff on the way, actually. Yeah, like I think I've gotten very good at After Effects over the last year, or like good enough to be able to like teach it in some fashion. At least, I mean, After Effects you can do so much in, but at least within the rails of like product design. Low key, I'm an agency guy too, but right now the money is low based on my past research. Yeah, I mean, you just have to find a high paying agency, right? Like YML, they're based in San Francisco, so you get paid, San Francisco salary. So it just depends where they're based. I will say, compared to being in house, it's probably lower, but you can do well at an agency. Especially if you're someone who's like providing value and you show your worth. Like those conversations can be had. You just have to find an agency that like really knows your worth, I would say. Like I feel like I could probably, if I was just chasing money, yeah, I could go in house somewhere. But again, it's like it's not just about the money for me. It's like I need to be motivated every day. I mean, I love being able to do what I love every single day, and work with awesome people. So I'll have to check SF agencies then. Yeah, I would just say don't chase the money though. I mean, of course, money's great, but like no amount of money. Like I've been on projects where like no amount of money can make it worth it. Like, so that's the other thing about agencies too. Like some projects are going to be like the best projects you've ever been on, and some you're going to be like, when will this ever end? Do you feel that one day we will have all the problems solved with all the products available for them, or is it never ending? I think it's never ending. And then once it gets good, we'll create our own problems. Right? It's like we tend to do that. I look for work culture and I like project varieties. Yeah, I would say that should be like your first and foremost, and just like opportunities to grow, right? Like especially early in your design career, I think it's great to get that mentorship right away. There is also something to be said for just like, say you're the sole designer at a startup or something. Like, of course you're going to learn a ton, right? But you might not have that guidance that would make your job a lot easier. So I think there's value in everything. You just have to kind of approach it like a designer, right? Like always be asking the right questions. And if you don't know something, how am I going to learn it? And just be self-sufficient and just have your own. You got to be a little selfish too with your career, right? It's like, if you want to make a certain dollar amount, it's like, what skills do I need to develop to get on that level, right? Like look at, if you want to work at Google or Apple, like, go on LinkedIn and look at, Google or search product designer at Apple, look at their portfolio, look at the type of work that they're producing. Like that's a good strategy too. That for some reason is often overlooked. Like if you want to work as a designer at a place, go on LinkedIn, find someone who works at that company who's a designer and look at their portfolio. It's usually like that simple. It's like, is my work on this level or is it not? That at least is going to be what gets you in the door. Then from there, it's like, will you be a good fit? Are you a good communicator? Will I want to work with this person, right? It's like that other half, the more, the less technical side, I would say, which is equally important, especially, I'm learning that, especially as a lead now, like that's, I'm starting to pull away a little bit from the hands-on design. I'm still pretty hands-on, but compared to where I was, as a senior designer, where I'm more or less the one doing all the production design, it's like I have other responsibilities now. So these are all great questions. Thank you. Any other questions? We've been on, oh wow, almost an hour. Going once. That was a lot of good questions from only like 6 people. So I'm literally a product design lead, just a title at very early stage startup, but it's a lot of responsibility, but fun. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, titles, I think those titles are kind of arbitrary, right? They'll mean different things at different places, but it sounds like you might actually be the one leading design, so it's not necessarily wrong. Agencies typically have a very similar structure where like you have associate designer, which is basically like junior designer. It's like a nicer way of saying that. Associate designer, senior designer, lead designer, associate creative director, and then, executive creative director or VP design, depending on where you are. So that's like the agency structure, I would say. If you're in-house, it's probably a little more subjective or exclusive to that company. But yeah, enjoy it. Yeah, startups can be fun. It's like it's a good way to hit the jackpot. Make sure you get some equity too. If the company takes off, you want to have that ownership. Planning to do portfolio reviews / one-on-one consulting time anytime soon. Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely be open to that if that's something you guys are interested in. If you guys want to book some time with me, we can figure something out. Shoot me an email, maybe. I'll put my email in the chat if anyone wants it. I'm also thinking about rebranding this channel. It's on my list. I don't think JP Design Academy really rolls off the tongue. I think everything I wanted initially when I was making this YouTube channel was kind of taken, but that's about right. Yeah, I think I'm going to rebrand if I get back into the mix of uploading regularly. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm always, at the very least, open to talking to new designers. It's a quote that we can't fulfill all people's needs. Some people left angry with their problems unsolved. If we replace people with users, then isn't it a bad thing that some of our users are left unsolved? I mean, do we care for all users or only the majority ones? Well, I think, as designers, we kind of have responsibilities to care for anyone who's going to be interfacing with your product, right? I mean, there's actually to the point where there's legal rules around it these days, like accessibility in particular. It's such a huge part of our responsibilities as designers. Of course, if you're working on a food delivery app or something, you're going to look at who's using that product and focus on them mostly, because those, from a business standpoint, are going to be the ones making you the money. So I would say at some point you need to focus on the majority and not the people who aren't making you money, from a business standpoint. But that doesn't mean that you're going to design a product that's inaccessible for everyone. So hopefully I understood that quote. Cool. Really appreciate the participation. The first 5 minutes, I was like, is anyone going to show up to this? I've been gone for a year. Yeah, I'd like to say I promise more videos, but again, it's just kind of tough, but I'm going to definitely do what I can, especially like I said, when these two products go live. I want to go real deep. It might even be a multiple part kind of series or something. Yeah, I mean, I'm down to live stream. If that's something you guys think I should do more often, definitely down. I'm just curious, I guess, when the best time is. I'm on the West Coast, so I mean, I guess this time probably works pretty well, right? It's after work hours. Thanks for that. Yeah, I guess I'll do more. These are always fun. I don't like planning things. I'm not the type of person who ever writes things down or plans ahead. Something I should probably work on, but these I've just kind of been winging and seeing, just trying to get a sense of what people are looking for. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for joining. I almost logged off early after 5 minutes. Awesome. Yeah, maybe one thing I do want to do is more portfolio reviews, and maybe I could even make those into videos. So if you guys wanted to send anything you have, or just if you have questions about the designs themselves or anything, if you just want me to give feedback, I'm happy to do that, maybe on stream or just as a video. That'd be really cool. I think maybe helpful. So again, yeah, put my email in the chat if anyone wants to do that. I'll see how to approach that moving forward. Cool. All right, well, we're at exactly an hour, so maybe that's my cue. But again, thanks for all the participation, and catch you soon.